In America, everyone counts, and the 2020 census is how that great promise is kept. Respond today online, by phone, or by mail, and help inform hundreds of billions in funding for education, health programs, and more. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov. Now, the Portsmouth police, this was also interesting here. They are trying to prevent District Attorney Stephanie Morales from handling the Confederate monuments case. And you saw there why I read from the police chief's statement. The police chief said that Portsmouth Commonwealth's attorney Stephanie Morales can't prosecute the 14 cases because she has been named as a potential witness. Well, DA Morales joins us right now. So she's saying you were a witness. Were you on the scene when supposedly they attacked or did whatever to this monument?
Absolutely not. I was most certainly not on the scene.
So how are you a witness if you weren't even there?
I'm not a witness, and the clear ramification of naming me as a witness creates a situation where now we have to determine with the court whether there is indeed a conflict of interest that would warrant a special prosecutor coming on the case, which creates a situation then that you have someone who is acting as Commonwealth's attorney who is not accountable to the members of my community who elected me to do this very job. Never thought I would see myself fighting to stay on a case where you certainly know no matter what the outcome is, you are going to have a substantial amount of people upset with you. However, I fight this fight every day to ensure that we are working in a fair and equitable way. And I will not sit back while anyone attempts to usurp my authority to do the job that the people of Portsmouth have elected me to do.
So the police chief says you were a potential witness. You're either a witness or you're not. So has she even responded? What's the evidence? What are you talking about? What does that even mean?
Well, this is a very peculiar process, the way this is playing out, because typically we don't see cases manifesting in this way where the magistrate system is utilized 2 months after the fact. Typically, when there's a long-term investigation, the matter is presented to my office in order for us to make a prosecutorial determination about whether there's even probable cause to present this to a grand jury. Usually, if law enforcement is going to the magistrate, they do it right when the incidents take place. And so this is not, this is the usual course of action they took, but not in a usual time frame. And so in order to determine usually who witnesses are, you lay out the reason why the witnesses are to be deemed witnesses in the first place. And the way it's listed, it just indicates that I am, quote unquote, potentially a material and eyewitness. It places me in this category. And again, I most certainly was not an eyewitness. So I can't speak to the sentiments or the thought process of the individual who led this investigation. All I can do is speak to what the ramifications are for our community. And again, when they elect me to do a job, I stand up to do that job no matter how difficult.
Does it seem strange that all of a sudden, 2 months after this supposed incident took place, that the police would hit 14 people with charges?
Well, again, we've seen all types of things occur. And the fact that you asked this question is a good time to highlight that the majority of the cases that come before my office, they don't have national media attention. They don't involve people who are particularly powerful or who have voice. And this is where my office has to stand in the gap to ensure that there is procedural fairness. And so, no, we don't typically see this happen on a regular basis. But when we do, we are the ones who stand in the gap to ensure that there is procedural justice for all who are involved, because that's a very important component. And, I'm very, very concerned in this case with procedural fairness. And when we have a delay where, again, you have a situation not getting into the merits of the case, but everybody who has paid attention and who has watched the Facebook Live and other footage can see who was on the scene. And, to think about whether or not law enforcement could have, procedurally in a just manner, acted more quickly, or again, go through the typical process, present my office with a file that we can make a prosecutorial determination with. That would have been the usual typical process. But again, in Virginia, we have no intake unit in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. We have the magistrate system, and it's a very good time to highlight the systemic issues that we face that can create these opportunities for procedural injustice.
So the Virginia pilot has this story, and they named the 14 people charged: NAACP President James Boyd, Vice President Louis Gibbs, School Board Member Lakeisha Clue Atkinson, Public Defender Brenda Spry, Assistant Public Defenders Meredith Kramer and Alexandra Stevens, Amira Bethea, Kimberly Wimbish, Dana Worthington, Lakeisha Hicks, Raymond Brothers, Hannah Renee Rivera, and Brandon Woodard. Now, what's interesting is that several of those who were charged there were present on the day of the protest. Yet, the state senator who was charged, what's weird to me is that this says she was in Richmond. And I guess, what's interesting here is that, again, I've had experience covering things. Normally, police make their charges, and then it goes to the district attorney's office as to whether or not it moves forward. So in this case, they're saying you are a potential witness, but they don't even state that you were there.
I was not there, so I can very, very clearly state to everyone that I was not on scene. And, again, what you pointed out is something that we have to grapple with right now. We have to look at the way the system is designed and what effect does that have and what power does that place in the hands of people to create these situations where there's just mass confusion, which doesn't benefit anyone in my community or beyond. But it's, very clear I was not present. And the effect of naming me as a witness is to create a conflict of interest, which brings in a special prosecutor. It's very clear. It's clear what the efforts are. And it's actually, the chief of police opined later and expounded further. Because initially at her press conference, she had indicated that she spoke with me. She asked for a special grand jury and a special prosecutor, and no action was taken. And so to clarify with that, I'll give you the example with the case that you know about. There's a case that I prosecuted back in 2015 through 2016, where William Chapman II was killed by a police officer in my city. And when I prosecuted that case, and I was the lead prosecutor on that case myself, which ended in a voluntary manslaughter conviction. When I prosecuted that case myself, I did not take that case to a special grand jury. I took that case to a regular grand jury after receiving a complete investigative file. And so I explained those things to the chief of police about how the process works. And following that, I released a statement from my office and placed it on my website that spoke directly to the process, that I require a complete investigative file before I will make a determination and consider whether something goes to grand jury. And clearly, I've made it very, very clear that the only way a special prosecutor will be brought in is in the case of a conflict. So you can't just call me and say, I want a special prosecutor because I would like to have someone else. There has to be a conflict. So that knowledge was there, but there wasn't a clear statement as to the fact that there had been nothing presented to me for me to even make a determination. So later she expounded in another release and indicated that she had determined that she could not provide a file to me because I had a conflict. She actually used the words in her statement, conflict. And so it's, even though at first I was listed as a witness, now it's actually been said by the chief of police that they have determined that I have a conflict. And the only person that's responsible for determining that attorneys have conflicts are the attorneys ourselves. We're supposed to acknowledge that. And so if I'm a witness, that's up to me to state that, and I was not present. So I am absolutely fighting for my right to stay in this case in the capacity that the members of my community elected me to serve. It's not easy, but nothing I do is easy. That case where I had to prosecute the police officer, tried that case myself, that was not easy. So I don't shy away from difficult work. I lean into the work of the community. And I have to also say there was a group that I was a part of founding in Virginia called Virginia Progressive Prosecutors for Justice. And we advocated very strongly for all measures related to police accountability. We talked about wanting reform in the area of no-knock warrants so that we don't have what happened to our sister Breonna Taylor happen in Virginia. And so many other things that we advocated for that, again, we have to acknowledge the work that I have done that may lead some people to decide we want a different prosecutor on this case. But unfortunately for them, I was elected by the people of my community to do this difficult work and to make these determinations and ensure that we have equity racial equity, procedural fairness at all times for everybody.
All right. DA Stephanie Morales, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. As our community comes together to support the fight against racial injustice, I want to take a second to talk about one thing we can do to ensure our voices are heard. Not tomorrow, but now. Have your voices heard in terms of what kind of future we want by taking the 2020 census today at 2020census.gov? Now, folks, let me help you out. The census is a count of everyone living in the country. It happens once every 10 years. It is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. The thing that's important is that the census informs funding, billions of dollars, how they are spent in our communities every single year. I grew up in Clinton Park in Houston, Texas, and we wanted new parks and roads and a senior citizen center. Well, the census helps inform all of that and where funding goes. It also determines how many seats your state will get in the U.S. House of Representatives. Young black men and young children of color are historically undercounted, which means a potential loss of funding for services that helps our community. Folks, we have the power to change that. We have the power to help determine where hundreds of billions in federal funding go each year for the next 10 years. Funding that can impact our community, our neighborhoods, and our families and friends. Folks, responses are 100% confidential and can't be shared with your landlord, law enforcement, or any government agency. So please, take the 2020 census today. Shape your future. Start at 2020census.gov.